Fantastic. Okay. Where are my slides? All right. Thanks for having me, everyone. There's going to be a lot of puns in this presentation. As you can see, e-commerce, and then static, because Gatsby. So ecstatic commerce. Woohoo! This is a pretty fancy location. I think normally it's a ballroom. I think the mirror is very distracting. At least I found that to be. So please look in the middle, not at yourself. Cool. Now normally when I'm in this country, I'm sweating a lot, but this is very comfortable for me. The temperature is perfect. So I'm actually visiting our Singapore office last week and this week. And normally I'm based in our Amsterdam office in the Netherlands. So this is the view from my window normally. Down there is the swimming flower market. It's on the canal. And what you can see, the church is a melodic church. So every hour we get a little melody. It's great. And what you can see on the right there, that's Sir Nelson. You might be able to see a dog down there. And Sir Nelson is on call. As you can see, the API is up and running, so he can chill. This is actually a poster of Increment. It's a magazine about building and deploying software at scale. So if you're interested in that, you can look it up online. It's pretty cool. There's some good issues. Now, quickly about myself. My name is Thorsten Scheff. I'm originally from northern Germany, but because no one can pronounce that, you can just call me Thor. I think, being in northern Germany, that's close enough to the Norse kind of mythology. Yeah, so Thor. And then I guess my Twitter handle is pretty self-explanatory, ThorWebDev. I also got my .dev domain, so can you guess what it is? ThorWeb.dev. Yeah, cool. So what I do, I'm an integration engineer at Stripe, which means I work with many of our largest customers and partners, helping them build great payment experiences, checkout experiences, generally more complex integrations like multi-sided marketplaces. So, if you think of booking.com, where a customer pays and then the payment has to be routed to a hotel or a property, that's kind of a marketplace. So Uber or Grab. Oh yeah, Grab is a good example here, right? Payment goes in, needs to be routed to a driver. That's what we do. And I do that in continental Europe. Now, what I want to do with you today is what I call a Jamstack jam session. Have you heard of the term Jamstack before? Raise your hand. Brilliant. Yeah, so Jam stands for JavaScript APIs and Markup. And it's, pretty much a static site, like Gatsby is sort of a Jamstack application where you use JavaScript and APIs and potentially, markdown, markup, static files to serve your content. And so a Jamstack jam session actually means if you have your laptop with you, you can join me. You can pull it out now, open it up. I think there's a guest network, and we can actually get cracking. Or you can follow along, and the resources are available on thor.news/ecstatic if you want to follow along. Okay, if you have your laptop, now's the time. Crack it open. I can see you there in the front row. Put that water away. Okay. Now, let me see. Can you see that? Yeah. So Gatsby has a fantastic documentation. There's also Jason Langsdorff. He's on the DevRel team at Gatsby, and he does many live streams, which are really great to follow along. And there's the Gatsby CLI that you can install. I've already done that. And then we can simply run Gatsby new to scaffold a new project. So we're going to do that here. I'm in my document folder, Gatsby new. We're going to call it Gatsby, let's say Singapore. Cool. Now, while that is running, and I hope it is running, we can actually look at hooks. Quick show of hands, who here has used hooks in React? Okay, yeah, good amount of. Sorry?
Not production.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fair enough. So the reason why we need hooks, and actually what we're going to use is the effect hook. You're probably familiar with the component did mount function that you would use in your class components. Now, in function components, we can use the use effect function, which is exposed by React, to get sort of the same effect of component did mount. And the reason we need that is because later on we're going to load Stripe.js, which is our JavaScript library, which is going to be available on the window object, but because Gatsby sites are server-side rendered, we can't actually access the window object, in our normal React code. So that's why we need to wait until everything is mounted, and then we can access the window object. Cool. Let's see if we. Oh wow, still running. Should we talk a bit more about hooks? What's there to say? Can you read the size? Is that good?
Make it a bit bigger.
Bit bigger? Like that? Even bigger? Right. I mean, we're not actually really going to look at that, which is sort of fantastic. Okay, time has passed. Now let's open this in VS Code. I guess didn't work, so whatever. Just gonna come on. Open folder. Sorry. There we have it. Oh, it's like I've never used a laptop before. Okay. Here we are. So the structure is here. We have our pages. We have our index page in here, and what you can see, our index page is a function component that simply returns here our layout, the SEO, and all of that stuff. Now we actually want to use the use effect hook in there, so we need to turn this into a quick function. Just going to return that, and then what we can do is simply copy this. We don't have the variable here. We're just going to set this to 10 just to see if it works, and then let's actually. Is that size okay? Can you read that? Higher. Well, now that's a bit awkward. I'm going to zoom in when it gets important. Can you see that? Yeah, cool. So what we actually can do now is we can use Gatsby develop to run our development server. And then when we go back, open our local host. Oh, already have an error. Fantastic. Use effect is not defined. Yeah, that makes sense. We need to actually load it. What did I do? Oh yeah. Look at me. This is very collaborative. I like this. This is great. Ha! There we are. Can you always come to work with me? That'd be good. Awesome. And as you can see, okay, our effect hood is working. Great. So we have that. We have that set up. Now, what do we need to do? Yeah, so actually now we'll quickly register a Stripe account because we're going to use the new Stripe hosted checkout. Because we're building a static website, we're actually not having a server, so we're sort of outsourcing the whole checkout piece to Stripe. So what we can do is we can go to stripe.com/register. Actually, have you heard of Stripe? Anyone doesn't know Stripe? Okay, wow. So everyone? Oh yeah, that's okay. So what we do is online payments infrastructure. So you can sign up and within 5 minutes, well, probably 20 minutes, what we're doing here with all my talking, you can accept payments online. As a developer, it's really, really easy to do that, and that's sort of what I'm trying to demonstrate. Now, let's do this. Let's quickly sign up a new account. I'm going to do Thor plus Singapore React JS. Well, actually, maybe SG Stripe.com Thor. Now, can we get like a great Google password or something? Or actually, let's just do yeah. I mean, this is really, when you have your laptop and you follow along, it's not as boring. Cool. Oh, what? That is crazy now. Okay. Let's do React SG React JS. No, that, what? Okay. Not a robot. Come on. Cool. Now let's quickly pin that tab. And what we want to do is we want to use checkout. So we're going to go into the settings, into the checkout settings. And we're going to enable checkout. Cool. When we're operating in live mode and we're doing, we have a client-only implementation without a server, we actually specify our domain in live mode to make sure that, actually only your domain can redirect off to the checkout page. And now what we need to do, because we don't have a server-side component that can validate, the products and the SKUs and actually calculate what we need to charge, we need to tell Stripe about the products that we're selling. So my cool ebook, let me see if I can do Singapore dollars. Let's do 10 Singapore dollars. I'm not going to upload a picture without internet. Good luck. And now, once that happens, what we do in the background is actually we spin up a product object with an associated SKU. SKU stands for stock keeping unit. And so we can see our SKU here. We have a SKU ID. Can you see that? We have a SKU ID. And then we actually have a button used with checkout. And we're just going to follow along there what we have to do. So you can look at the steps here. We need to load Stripe.js. We need to provide a button. The button has a role link because it actually redirects off to a Stripe hosted checkout. We then need to initialize the Stripe library with our publishable key. And that is here going to be living on the window object. And that's why we're using hooks. And then lastly, when the button is clicked, we can simply call redirect to checkout with our SKU ID to then kick off the checkout process. And here we can specify success URL, where we return back to, if the payment was successful. or a cancel URL if the customer doesn't actually go through the checkout. Cool. I hope that is clear. So with Gatsby, because server-side rendered, the way you load Stripe.js is actually, well, at least what I do is use a plugin. So we can here find our Gatsby Stripe plugin. We're not using the Stripe checkout. That's for the old Stripe checkout. What we want here is the Stripe.js library. So what we can do now is we can install that plugin. Let's quickly kill the server. Install the plugin. And then what we need to do is in our Gatsby config, we need to register our plugin. Gatsby config.js. There we are. So actually going to make it the first plugin. And then, yeah, what's more to say here? The internet is slow. We can sort of look at the next steps that we'll need to do is we actually need a button. So let's, still running, wow. Let's simply put a button here. Okay, we're gonna call this Buy My Ebook. Let's give that a quick save. Are we still? Wow, okay. Still running. There we are. Now, if we fire this up again, just to quickly verify that the loading of the plugin all worked fine, we can go back to our page here. Let's see. And if we now check on the window object, and actually let me zoom that in, we can now see that we have the Stripe library loaded. Oh, we also have the Buy My Ebook function here, button, sorry. And we actually now need a function that triggers when the button is clicked. So we're going to just put a redirect to checkout function here. We don't really have any input parameter. We're just going to hard code the SKU ID in. So actually empty there. And then what we do for now is just console log that we're clicked. And then the button here we can simply do on click, and then we can specify the redirect to checkout reference to our function. That is now compiled, and so okay, that is all hooked up. The pipes are working. So let's have a look what we need to do next. Yeah, so we need to initialize Stripe. And then make Stripe available in our function later. So let's quickly give that a copy. So as I mentioned, because the Stripe library is on the window object, we actually need to do that here in the effect hook. So I can actually, we need a variable here, that would be helpful. And you can see now Stripe is not defined. That's because it's on the window. So if we give this a save now, that's all good. Warning, yeah, okay, Stripe. And now we can you see that? If I ask people, I'm just going to say it needs to be bigger, so ignore ignore my question. So what we need to do is redirect to checkout, but actually let me maybe zoom in here and give you a quick. So what you can see is actually the Stripe redirect to checkout returns a promise, because what happens here is we're actually sending off a request to Stripe with the SKU ID, with our publishable key the quantity, all of that. And then Stripe goes off and, we evaluate, does this SKU ID actually belong, to the account with this publishable key? And then we do the calculation for the total amount and all of that on our end. And then once that was successful, we return a checkout session back to the client, which is then used to redirect off to the checkout. And so the reason why this is a promise, if there was an error, for example, we actually return back, instead of redirecting off, we return back an error object to you when the promise resolves. So on the result object, you can then extract the error message if there was one. Cool. So we actually want to, because we have a promise here, we can use async await. So that is what we're going to do. And as I mentioned, we can extract the error object from the results. And now, because we're using await here, we need to declare our function as async. Okay, that looks good. Now we get a warning because the error is actually not used. To get rid of that, we could just simply do console warn and paste in the error there. Cool. Now, is that it? I think that might be it. Let's give that a reload just to be fresh. Actually, you can see a Stripe generated warning here. You can test Stripe.js with an unsecure connection, but when you put this into production, you actually want this to be secure. Cool. Now, if we click here, in order to use checkout, you must set an account or business name. Okay, this is actually a pretty helpful error message. So the error message actually links us off into our Stripe account. We can just Thors. I know I'm selling ebooks, but that just came to mind right now. Now, okay, I think that is the only one. Let's give that a try again. Here we are. We send that request to Stripe. We can kind of zoom in here a little. And now we can use any Stripe test card. I have them here in a sort of auto expander. Boom. And now in test mode, where Google wants to save it. And then, as you can see, I didn't change the result URL. So yeah, this page doesn't exist. So we would actually have to modify that here. And I guess what we could do is we could go to localhost. Was it 8,000? What was it? Yes, 8,000. And then we have page 2. So actually, page 2 on success. Let's go there. And if it's not successful, we just for the cancel URL, we just go back to our index page. Now let's quickly see if that works. No, what? Success must start with, oh yeah, okay. Now, that isn't secure, but let's try that. Cool, and we can actually go back here, cancel URL. Cool, so that worked fine. How are we on time? 5 minutes. Yeah, so there's kind of two things we could do now. We could actually take this and deploy it to Netlify. If you're interested in that, we could do that. Or alternatively, we could look at using the Stripe API to retrieve all the products we have on the account using GraphQL as Thomas laid out earlier, and sort of built a dynamic version that serves up all the products we have in Stripe dynamically. Sort of what's your preference? Looking at the GraphQL. Okay, I'm not going to hook it in, but actually we can. So I've written a tutorial here in Gatsby. And so what we've done right now is sort of the easy one-button example. And then we can look at the advanced example where we're importing SKUs via a source plugin. Let's see. So as Thomas mentioned, a source plugin, what it does is at build time, it goes off to the Stripe API. It pulls the data about our products and SKUs from Stripe and then makes it available as static data. I believe it's just JSON that is stored as part of the build process into our page. So in the end, it's static, but it's sort of dynamic at build time. And actually, the cool thing we can do is that Stripe generates webhooks when products are changed, for example, in the dashboard. And we can actually point that webhook at a Netlify build hook to then automatically rebuild our page, pulling in that new content. And so we can actually set up this continuous deployment with our static page. And I think Jason has actually done a pretty cool example where he's built a clock that literally redeploys, I think, every second, like rebuilds every second, and sort of shows you that idea of, okay, you probably wouldn't do that in real life, but the idea that building this based on some trigger is actually a pretty valid approach. Okay, but so what we can do then here is we can use the Gatsby source Stripe plugin. We say we want to pull in all the SKUs at build time, and now in this case actually the SKUs can't be accessed with our publishable key. So here what we actually would do is we would generate a restricted key, and the restricted key can read our products and SKUs, and then we would put that into an environment variable. And later on, for example, with Netlify, you could specify it as a build variable in the process. And once we've done that, what we can actually do, that's the .env here, we can create a component that lists all our SKUs. And Thomas had mentioned that there's sort of different queries. So here we use a static query, and we can then query all the SKUs for our products. What we want to get is all the Stripe SKUs. We go down in the edges. So at build time, what the plugin actually does is go off to Stripe, get the data, and then insert the nodes into kind of our unified GraphQL API within Gatsby. And then we can specify exactly all the attributes that we want. We need the ID, the SKU ID later. That's what we need to tell Stripe about. The currency, the price, and the name of the SKU. And then we can simply render a component with the return data that maps all of our SKUs. And here just outputting kind of the name of the SKU in a paragraph. Cool. I think we're at time. What's interesting there? I mean, we can look at this, yeah. So we would then have, and here I'm still in the tutorial using a class component, and we can actually look. I think I have this deployed. So if we look at the advanced example here now, we have 3 products, and when I click the Buy Me button, depending on that, we go off kind of to buy that product. There's also an example that builds a cart. You can build that in as well, if you want to support kind of multiple product buying. But here, really, what it does is it renders, and this component here, what you've seen, if we go back, this component renders, I've called it SKU card. And then the SKU card, again, has here our async function redirect to checkout. And the SKU in this case is now handed in from the SKU card. So when we generate the SKU card, we render it with the SKU ID as a parameter on that component. And then on the on-click event, we can actually hand that in. And so, built this once and kind of hand it off to our marketing or operations team, or whatever, and they can, for example, then use the Stripe dashboard or some content management system to modify the data. And when that happens, a webhook is fired, which kicks off our redeploy pipeline to pull in the new data. Okay, I'm going to stop here, but again. Well, actually, I think I have some more slides. Sorry. Well, it's really just Stripe is also hiring. Sorry, we're not sponsoring. I'm sort of hijacking this here, but just want to mention we have a couple offices around the globe as well as remotely. Here, the Singapore team has actually grown quite immensely. It's a really sweet team. If you're interested, here in the second row, there's actually a bunch of them sitting there if you want to chat with them, or come up to me later. Yeah, that's it from me. Thank you very much for having me and for your attention. And please do tweet at me with your questions, feedback. This is very much a learning experience for me as well. Or shout out your questions now. Thanks.
One or two questions?
Yeah.
Just curious. So, as I understood, you were showing how to deploy Stripe form with Gatsby. Do you guys also use Gatsby at Stripe?
Do we use Gatsby at Stripe? Is that the question? Yes. So we don't. As far as I know, we don't use it at Stripe. So our documentation or things like that. That's sort of bespoke systems that we've built in terms of like content management. There is experiments going on, sort of using Gatsby for tutorials, for example. I think that would be a great use case. I think anything really that isn't changed a lot, but is read a lot. So you write it once, and then it's basically just a bunch of read operations. That's where Gatsby is really good. As one example. So that could be a potential area, but as it stands today, we don't use Gatsby in production at Stripe now. But many of our users do.
What's your second style?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, so actually all of our dashboard is a React nowadays. So it is a single page application, and the dashboard actually uses GraphQL to access data. So if you want to use GraphQL with Stripe, you can just join us and then you can use it. No, we're actively looking into that. But yeah, so that's sort of the stack for the dashboard. React application. We actually have the design team manages all of our React components. So we have kind of an internal component library, for anything in the dashboard, buttons, pop-ups, all of that is kind of in our own internal component library. And then we have the API, which is built in Ruby, I think custom version of Sinatra, and then MongoDB kind of sitting all on AWS as it stands today.
Sorry, to follow up on the question, like you said that many of your customers use Gatsby, Gatsby. Like, do you know like what size? Like, is it usually small companies or like one developer workshop, or?
Yeah, I think it's different. There was this one good example, which I now forgot. I think it was some sanitary product. So that was more kind of a medium-sized company, you know, kind of a good size. Was working with sort of a kind of marketing agency to set that all up. But yeah, I think in that space, well, as it stands today, it's sort of more kind of the SMB world that is using it. Yeah.
You thinking of Harry's in the US when they launched their women's razor?
Yeah, I think it's that Harry's. Yeah, the women's razor.
But Mingo is a pretty good medium for us about it. They use Gatsby, kind of different technical and aspiration.
Cool. Yeah, so go talk to that guy. He knows his stuff. Yeah. Awesome. Any more questions on Gatsby, not on Stripe? Cool. I guess chatting, networking. Yeah. Thank you.